The vast emptiness of space surrounded the Earth Defense Force flagship Defiant as it moved slowly toward the meeting point. Captain Susan Miller stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Her blue uniform was pressed perfectly, not a wrinkle to be seen. Her short brown hair framed a face that showed both strength and wisdom earned from 15 years of military service. "Status report," Susan said, her voice calm despite the tension that filled the bridge. Lieutenant Greg Howard looked up from his station. "The alien ships are holding position at the edge of the solar system, Captain. They've sent no new messages since agreeing to the meeting." Susan nodded. Humanity had detected the approach of the massive fleet 3 weeks ago. The ships had appeared suddenly at the edge of our solar system, using technology far beyond Earth's understanding. Their first message had been simple. "We come representing the galactic hegemony. Prepare to receive our envoys." Research into the radio signals from distant stars had given humanity some warning. For years, scientists had picked up fragments of transmissions that hinted at a vast empire spanning the stars. The messages spoke of the hegemony, a coalition of thousands of species ruled by the ancient Zorkians, a race so old they had explored the stars when humans were still learning to use fire. "Communications, open a channel," Susan ordered. "Let's remind our visitors that we come in peace." "Channel open, Captain," replied Communications Officer Kate Young, her fingers dancing over the control panel. Susan straightened her shoulders. "This is Captain Susan Miller of the Earth Defense Force ship Defiant. We welcome the representatives of the galactic hegemony and look forward to peaceful discussions." The main screen flickered, then revealed the image of a being that made several bridge officers gasp. Admiral Kazat Vex of the hegemony stood over 8 feet tall with gray-blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. 4 arms extended from a powerful torso, and the being's eyes, 3 of them, glowed with an unnatural yellow light. "Captain Miller," the alien spoke, its mouth moving strangely around the human words. "I am Admiral Kazat Vex, representative of the Eternal Hegemony. We have studied your transmissions and learned your primary language to facilitate this meeting." Susan nodded respectfully. "We appreciate your effort, Admiral. Earth is eager to establish friendly relations with the galactic community." The alien's expression changed slightly, though Susan couldn't interpret the meaning. "You misunderstand, Captain. This is not a meeting between equals. The hegemony has ruled unchallenged for 50,000 of your years. We have assimilated or destroyed over 10,000 civilizations." A cold feeling settled in Susan's stomach, but she kept her expression neutral. "I see. And what is the purpose of your visit to Earth?" "To deliver the standard terms of incorporation." The Admiral's voice remained flat, emotionless. "Earth will surrender its sovereignty, provide resources according to our calculations, and become a protectorate of the hegemony. In return, you will receive protection and limited access to some of our technologies." The bridge fell silent. Susan felt the eyes of her crew on her, waiting for her response. "And if we decline these terms?" she asked quietly. Admiral Kazatvex seemed almost surprised by the question. No species declines, it would be illogical, but the consequence would be immediate annihilation. Your civilization is primitive by our standards. Your destruction would require minimal effort. Susan took a deep breath. Earth's leaders had discussed this possibility. Their orders had been clear. Maintain independence at all costs. Admiral, with respect, Earth must decline your offer. We wish to engage with the galactic community as equals, not subjects. Surely there's room for negotiation. The alien's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. There is no negotiation. You have made your choice. The screen went dark. They're powering weapons, shouted Defensive Systems Officer Paul Garcia. Multiple energy signatures from all ships. Susan didn't hesitate. Battle stations. Raise shields. All weapons ready. Alarm klaxons blared throughout the ship as the crew rushed to their combat positions. The Defiant was the newest and most advanced ship in Earth's fleet, but it was untested against alien technology. "Captain," called Science Officer Alan Porter from his station, "I'm activating the experimental quantum phase shields. Now, Alan was the genius behind Earth's newest defense technology, shields that existed partially in a different dimension, theoretically making them much stronger than conventional barriers. Until now, they had never been tested in actual combat. Tiatua first hegemony blast hit the Defiant with blinding intensity. The ship shuddered but held together. Shields holding at 92%, Paul reported, surprise evident in his voice. Whatever they hit us with, the quantum shields are handling it. Susan allowed herself a small smile. Target the lead vessel. Mass. Drivers only. Earth's ships were equipped with kinetic weapons, essentially highly advanced railguns that fired metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The technology was considered outdated by Earth standards, with energy weapons being the focus of recent development. But Alan had insisted on keeping the mass drivers, arguing that different weapon types provided tactical flexibility. Mass drivers. Locked, Weapons Officer Jack Winters confirmed. Firing. The Defiant shuddered as its main guns launched their projectiles. On the view screen, Susan watched as the slugs crossed space in seconds, then tore through the hegemony ship as if its shields weren't even there. Direct hit, Jack shouted. Their shields failed completely. Alan looked up from his console, excitement in his eyes. Captain, I think I understand. Their ships are designed to block energy weapons. They're using phase disruption fields that would stop any laser or plasma weapon. But they have no defense against physical projectiles. They probably abandoned that technology millennia ago. Susan immediately grasped the implications. All ships, this is Captain Miller. Target hegemony vessels with mass drivers only. Repeat, kinetic weapons only. The space around Earth lit up as humanity's ships opened fire. The hegemony fleet, caught completely off guard, suffered devastating damage in the first volley. 3. Massive dreadnoughts exploded in silent bursts of light and debris. The remaining alien ships began to retreat, their formation breaking apart in disarray. They're running, Kate said, disbelief in her voice. We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kazatvex's vessel, communications reported. On screen, Susan ordered. The alien appeared again, but its composure was gone. Behind it, smoke filled the bridge of its ship, and other aliens rushed about in what could only be panic. What are you? The Admiral asked, genuine fear in its voice. How is this possible? No species has stood against the hegemony for 10,000 years. Susan stood tall, her voice steady. We are humans, Admiral. We don't surrender our home without a fight. Remember that when you report back to your hegemony. The transmission cut off as the alien ships jumped to faster-than-light speed, disappearing from Earth's sensors. The bridge of the Defiant erupted into cheers, but Susan raised her hand for quiet. This isn't over, she said, her expression serious. We've won the first battle, but we've just started a war with an empire that spans galaxies. She looked around at her crew, seeing determination replace their initial excitement. But today, we've learned something important. They can be beaten. As the Defiant turned back toward Earth, Susan knew that everything had changed. Humanity had stood its ground against the star's greatest power, and the hegemony had fled. The message would spread across the galaxy. The humans are coming, and for the first time in millennia, the hegemony would know fear. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within days of the battle near Earth, reports reached the farthest corners of the hegemony. The mighty empire that had ruled unchallenged for 50,000 years had suffered a defeat at the hands of a species that had barely mastered space travel. On Zorkia Prime, the capital world of the hegemony, the Council of Elders gathered in their ancient chamber. The room was circular, with 50 seats arranged in rising tiers. Each seat held a representative of a major species, though all knew that the 5 Zorkian elders who sat at the highest level held the real power. Elder Zorith, the oldest living Zorkian at over 8,000 years old, raised a long-fingered hand for silence. The chamber, which had been filled with worried voices, fell quiet. General Drax, Zorith said, his voice thin but carrying throughout the chamber. Show us what happened. General Drax stepped forward. Unlike most military leaders, he was not Zorkian but came from the Vuldar race, reptilian beings known for their tactical minds. His scales shimmered under the chamber's lights as he activated the holographic projector in the center of the room. "Honored elders, esteemed representatives," Drax began. "What I am about to show you is disturbing." The hologram sprang to life, showing the battle from multiple angles. The council watched in silence as human ships withstood the full power of hegemony weapons, then responded with projectiles that tore through the most advanced shields in the galaxy. When the recording ended, the chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted questions and demands, many rising from their seats in agitation. "Silence," Elder Zorith commanded, and the room gradually quieted. "General, explain how this could happen." Drax pointed to the frozen image of a human ship, firing its weapons. "The humans use what we would consider primitive technology. They fire solid metal projectiles at high speeds using magnetic acceleration. But our phase shields were designed to stop energy weapons, lasers, plasma, particle beams. They have no effect on physical objects." "But that's absurd," said the representative from Nexus 4, a world known for its advanced technology. "No civilized species uses kinetic weapons anymore. They're inefficient and crude. And yet," Drax replied grimly, "they penetrated our defenses completely." Far away from this meeting, on Earth, similar discussions were taking place. In the White House Situation Room, President Nancy Clark listened as military advisors presented their analysis of the battle. "Madam President," said General Frank Simmons, "we caught them off guard this time, but they'll adapt. We need to prepare for war." President Clark was a tall woman with silver hair who had won office based on her decades of diplomatic service. She had hoped her presidency would be marked by peace, not the first interstellar war in human history. "Do we have any choice?" she asked, looking around the table. "No, ma'am," replied Defense Secretary Will Peterson. "They made their intentions clear. They expect surrender or they'll return with a larger force." The president nodded slowly. "Then we prepare. I want full military production, every shipyard working around the clock, and I want Captain Miller here immediately." 3 days later, Susan Miller stood in the Oval Office as President Clark pinned the rank of admiral to her uniform. "The Defiant will be the flagship of Earth's first battle fleet," the president told her. "We're calling it the Vanguard Force. You'll have 20 ships initially, with more to follow as they're built." Susan accepted the new rank with a mixture of pride and anxiety. "Madam President, the hegemony controls thousands of worlds. We'll be outnumbered no matter how many ships we build. Which is why we don't fight a conventional war," President Clark replied. "We strike fast, we hit hard, and we disappear before they can respond. This will be a guerrilla war on a galactic scale." Across the Capitol, in a secure laboratory beneath the Pentagon, Dr. Alan Porter worked tirelessly to understand the alien technology salvaged from the wreckage of a damaged hegemony ship. His team had recovered fragments of their shield generators and weapons systems. Alan hadn't slept properly in days. His normally neat appearance had given way to rumpled clothes and messy hair. But his eyes were bright with excitement as he briefed the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "Their entire defense strategy is based on energy shields," he explained, pointing to diagrams projected on the wall. "They've been using the same basic technology for thousands of years, just making it more powerful. But they've completely abandoned physical armor or defenses against kinetic weapons." Admiral Joe Benson, the head of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "Why would an advanced civilization make such a basic mistake?" Alan smiled. "It's not a mistake if you've never faced an enemy who fights differently. The hegemony has conquered every species it's encountered for millennia. They all developed along similar technological paths, but Earth developed in isolation following our own path. So they've specialized themselves into vulnerability," Admiral Benson said thoughtfully. "Exactly," Alan agreed. "And there's more. We've analyzed their communications. They have no encryption we can't break. They haven't needed secure communications in thousands of years because no one could challenge them." Meanwhile, across hegemony space, panic was spreading. The border worlds, planets closest to Earth, had begun to detect human scout ships appearing briefly at the edges of their systems before vanishing again. On the luxury resort world of Elysium, tourists from 50 different species packed their belongings hurriedly as evacuation ships arrived. The local governor, a minor Zorkian noble named Kazatmur, tried without success to calm the crowds. "There is no need for alarm," he announced over the public address system. "The Hegemony Defense Force will protect this world." But his words rang hollow. Everyone had seen the recordings of the battle. Everyone knew that the Hegemony ships had fled from human weapons. In a small trading outpost on Elysium's third moon, a group of merchants gathered in a dimly lit bar. They represented a dozen different species, all members of the trading guild that moved goods throughout Hegemony space. "My cousin serves on a border patrol ship," said a four-armed Quarn trader, its voice low. "They were ordered to intercept a human vessel last week. When they got close, the humans fired something that went right through their shields. Only 5 crew members survived." A silence fell over the group. "What do we do if they come here?" asked a small furry being from the Lumar system. The oldest trader, a Vex with gray skin and wise eyes, leaned forward. "If you see humans," it said quietly, "run. Don't fight. Don't negotiate. Just run." The advice spread from that small bar across dozens of worlds, whispered in marketplaces and transmitted in coded messages between ships. It was not the official response of the Hegemony, whose leaders still confidently predicted victory. But among ordinary citizens, a different understanding was taking hold. The humans were coming. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy was afraid. Back on Earth, Admiral Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the newly refitted Defiant. Through the view screen, she watched as 19 more ships took position alongside her own. The Vanguard force was ready. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Lieutenant Greg Howard, now serving as her first officer. Susan took a deep breath. She thought about the enormous responsibility on her shoulders. Humanity's first interstellar fleet heading into battle against an empire that spanned galaxies. "Send to all ships," she ordered. "We are the Vanguard. We fight not just for Earth, but for every world that desires freedom. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do." The fleet engaged its engines, leaving Earth behind in a flash of light. The war had begun. 6 months had passed since Admiral Susan Miller led the Vanguard force from Earth. In that time, her fleet had grown to 35 ships and had captured 12 Hegemony systems. The humans employed hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Susan stood on the bridge of the Defiant looking at the tactical display. The Proxima Centauri system glowed before her, home to one of the Hegemony's largest shipyards. "Status report," she ordered. Lieutenant Greg Howard checked his console. "All ships in position, Admiral. The Hegemony Defense Fleet is patrolling the outer system, just as our intelligence suggested." Susan nodded. "And they still haven't detected us?" "No, ma'am," replied Communications Officer Kate Young. "Dr. Porter's stealth field is working perfectly. They have no idea we're here." After studying Hegemony sensor technology, Alan Porter had developed a way to bend light and other forms of radiation around Earth ships, making them nearly invisible to alien detection systems. "Good," Susan said. "Send the signal to begin Operation Hammer." Across the system, 25 human ships decloaked simultaneously and launched attacks on Hegemony defensive positions. The element of surprise worked perfectly. Within minutes, the outer defenses were in chaos. "Admiral," Kate called out. "Commander Webb's ground team is ready for deployment." Commander Ryan Webb led the Marine forces attached to the Vanguard fleet. A tall man with dark skin and a quiet voice, he had proven himself an excellent ground combat leader. While Susan's ships engaged the Hegemony fleet, Ryan would lead a team to infiltrate the shipyard itself. "Tell Commander Webb he has a green light," Susan ordered, "and remind him, we need those shipyard control systems intact." In the Defiance launch bay, Ryan Webb checked his assault team one last time. 20 Marines in powered combat armor stood ready, weapons charged. The armor was a marvel of human engineering, enhancing strength and speed while providing protection against Hegemony. Energy weapons. "Remember the plan," Ryan told his team. "We go in fast, secure the control center, and download the shipyard schematics. Minimal casualties if possible." The Marines nodded. They had done this kind of mission before, but never at a target this important. Launch in 30 seconds, the bay controller announced. Ryan sealed his helmet and gave the thumbs-up signal. The dropship's engines hummed to life. The battle outside was growing more intense. Human ships darted between the larger hegemony vessels, firing mass driver rounds that tore through alien shields. The hegemony responded with energy weapons that mostly missed their faster targets. The dropship launched, accelerating toward the massive orbital structure that housed the shipyard. Its stealth systems kept it hidden until the last moment. Approaching target, the pilot announced. Deploying in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ship attached itself to an outer airlock. Cutting lasers sliced through the lock mechanism, and Ryan led his team into the hegemony shipyard. They met light resistance at first, maintenance workers and security drones not equipped for serious combat. The Marines moved quickly through the corridors following the path they had memorized from intelligence reports. As they approached the central control hub, Ryan held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. His helmet sensors detected a large number of life forms ahead. Heavy resistance in the control center, he reported back to the Defiant. At least 30 guards. Proceed with caution, Commander, came Susan's voice through his comm system. We need those control systems. Ryan was considering his options when a strange sound came from a side corridor. He motioned for 2 Marines to investigate. Sir, one called back. You need to see this. In the corridor stood a group of aliens unlike any Ryan had seen before. They were tall and insectoid, with 4 arms and compound eyes. Their exoskeletons were a deep purple color, and they carried what appeared to be tools, not weapons. One stepped forward, raising its upper arms in what Ryan interpreted as a peaceful gesture. Humans, it said in broken English. We Valkyrie. We help you. Ryan kept his weapon ready but didn't aim it directly at the alien. Why would you help us? The Valkyrie's mandibles clicked before it spoke again. Hegemony enslaved Valkyrie 500 years ago. Force us work in shipyards. You fight hegemony. We help you. Ryan made a quick decision. Do you know another way? Into the control center? The Valkyrie nodded, its compound eyes reflecting the corridor lights. Follow, we show. Ryan sent a quick message to the Defiant explaining the situation, then followed the Valkyrie down a maintenance tunnel that wasn't on any of their maps. 10 minutes later, they emerged from a service hatch directly into the control center, catching the hegemony guards completely by surprise. The battle was brief. The guards surrendered quickly when they realized they were outmatched. Ryan's team secured the room while the Valkyrie showed them how to access the main computer system. Defiant, this is Webb, Ryan reported. Control center secure. We have allies. Valkyrie workers who were forced to work here. They're helping us. On the bridge of the Defiant, Susan Miller listened to Ryan's report with growing interest. Ask them if there are more Valkyrie who would join us, she ordered. The answer came back quickly. There were thousands of Valkyrie working in the shipyard, all of them resentful of their hegemony masters. This changes everything, Susan said to her officers. We're not just fighting against the hegemony now, we're fighting for everyone they've subjugated. Hours later, the battle for the Proxima Centauri shipyard was over. Human ships had driven off or destroyed the hegemony defense fleet, and the shipyard itself was under their control. But the biggest victory wasn't the capture of the facility. It was the alliance with the Valkyrie. The leader of the Valkyrie workers, who introduced himself as T. Krill, met with Susan and Ryan aboard the Defiant. Alan Porter joined them, fascinated by the opportunity to speak with a new alien species. Valkyrie grateful, T. Krill said, his voice becoming more confident with the human language. Hegemony took our homeworld, forced us to work. Many Valkyrie worlds still under hegemony control. Susan leaned forward. We're fighting to protect our own world from the hegemony. But perhaps we can help each other. Takril's compound eyes seemed to brighten. Alliance? Humans and Valkyrie together? Yes, Susan said. An alliance. We have weapons and shields the hegemony can't stop. You have knowledge of their systems and star charts we don't possess. We also have this, Tikaril said, handing Alan a small device. Communication codes. All hegemony ships and bases very secret. Alan's eyes widened as he examined the device. With this, we could listen to all their communications, maybe even send false orders. The Alliance was formed that day. The Valkyrie provided Earth with detailed star charts, communication codes, and intelligence on hegemony weaknesses. In return, humans shared their shield technology and weapons designs. Word spread quickly through the hidden networks that connected subjugated species across the hegemony. The humans had not just fought the masters of the galaxy, they had allied with one of the enslaved races. Hope, long forgotten under the hegemony's rule, began to stir again. Back on Earth, Alan Porter worked day and night with a team of Valkyrie scientists who had traveled from Proxima Centauri. Together, they developed new technologies that combined human innovation with Valkyrie knowledge. Their first joint creation was the Gravity Lance, a weapon that used the hegemony's own shield frequency to create a feedback loop, collapsing the energy field from within. In the council chamber on Zorkia Prime, Elder Zorith listened with growing concern as General Drax reported the loss of the Proxima Centauri shipyard. The situation worsened, Drax said grimly. The humans have allied with the Valkyrie rebels. Our spies report that other subjugated species are considering joining them. This cannot be allowed, another elder said angrily. We should deploy the planet killers, destroy Earth completely. Drax shook his head. Our intelligence suggests the humans have already prepared countermeasures. They seem to anticipate our strategies before we implement them. Elder Zorith raised a hand for silence. After a long moment he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of a decision he never thought he would make. Begin the evacuation of our border worlds, he ordered. The hegemony is now at war. 1 year had passed since the Human-Valkyrie Alliance was formed. In that time, the rebellion against the hegemony had grown beyond anything Susan Miller could have imagined. 3 more species had joined their cause. The Quilnar, masters of biological engineering, the Treski with their ability to manipulate time in small areas, and the Draconites, beings made of living crystal who could survive in the harshest environments. The Vanguard fleet had grown to over 100 ships, a mix of human vessels and converted hegemony craft crewed by freed slaves. They had liberated 28 systems, and Admiral Miller had become a name spoken with hope by oppressed species across the galaxy. On the Defiant, Susan looked at the holographic map showing their progress. The rebellion had pushed deep into hegemony territory, but the core worlds remained heavily defended. It's time, she said to her assembled commanders. We strike at the heart. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. Zorkia Prime, the homeworld of the species that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years. Is that wise, Admiral? Asked Captain Lori Chen, who commanded the heavy cruiser Orion. The defenses around Zorkia are said to be impenetrable. Susan nodded. They are strong, yes, but we've intercepted communications indicating that they're pulling ships from other systems to reinforce their borders. Their fleet is stretched thin. Commander Ryan Webb, who had been promoted after his success at Proxima Centauri, stepped forward. My team has been working with Tikril and the other Valkyrie engineers. We have detailed schematics of Zorkia's defense grid. He activated a holographic display showing the Zorkian system. There's a weak point here, he said, pointing to an orbital station. The Planetary Shield Control Center. If we can get a team inside, we can bring down the shields for the fleet. Susan studied the display. It's risky. They'll be expecting something like this, which is why we don't do it alone, said a new voice. All heads turned as Dr. Alan Porter entered the room. Beside him walked representatives of each allied species, Tikril of the Valkyrie, Kunar of the Quilnar, Treskov, the Treski and Drakon of the Draconites. We've been developing something, Alan said, excitement in his voice. A combined fleet action using all our technologies together. The plan they presented was bold. The Quilnar had developed biological cloaking technology that could hide ships from hegemony sensors. The Tresky could create temporal bubbles around small areas, slowing down time for anyone inside, perfect for neutralizing guard posts. The Draconites could survive in space without protection, and could attach themselves to the hulls of enemy ships to disable key systems. A joint operation, Susan said thoughtfully. Not just human tactics, but a true alliance strategy. The planning took weeks. Ships gathered from across liberated space, forming the largest fleet the rebellion had assembled. Over 400 vessels of various sizes and designs, crewed by 6 different species, all united against the hegemony. President Nancy Clark, speaking from Earth via secure communication, gave her approval for the mission. This could end the war, she told Susan. But the risk is enormous. If we lose this fleet, Earth will be vulnerable. I understand, Madam President, Susan replied, but we won't get a better chance. The hegemony is already beginning to adapt to our weapons. We need to strike now, while we still have the advantage. The President nodded. Then proceed, Admiral. And good luck. The jump to the Zorkian system was precisely coordinated. All 400 ships appeared simultaneously at different points around the system, immediately engaging hegemony defense vessels before they could organize a response. On the bridge of the Defiant, Susan watched as the battle unfolded. Human ships used their mass drivers to target hegemony vessels, while their alien allies deployed their own unique weapons and tactics. The combined assault overwhelmed the defenders. First and second defense lines breached, reported Greg Howard, now a captain himself. Path to the orbital station is clear, Susan nodded. Signal Commander Webb. His team is go. In the launch bay, Ryan Webb and his Special Forces team prepared for the most important mission of their lives. The team included humans and members of each allied species, each bringing their own skills to the operation. Remember, Ryan told them, we need to reach the control center and lower the planetary shields. We'll have 15 minutes before their security protocols can lock us out. The dropship launched, using Quilnar cloaking to approach the orbital station undetected. They attached to an outer airlock and cut their way inside. The first resistance they met was a squad of Zorkian elite guards, tall beings with advanced armor and energy weapons. Ryan signaled to Tresk, who activated his temporal device. A bubble of distorted time enveloped the guards, slowing their movements to a crawl. Move, Ryan ordered, and the team rushed past the nearly frozen guards. They fought their way deeper, into the station, using each species' abilities to overcome obstacles. The Valkyrie knew the station layout perfectly. The Draconites absorbed energy weapon fire without harm. The Quilnar released tiny biological drones that disabled security systems. Finally, they reached the central control room. The guards inside were prepared and a fierce firefight erupted. Ryan took cover behind a console as energy bolts flew past. We need to reach that control panel, he shouted, pointing to the main terminal across the room. Tikril clicked his mandibles. I go. Valkyrie exoskeleton stronger than human body. Before Ryan could argue, Tikril darted from cover, his 4 arms working independently as he returned fire while running. Energy bolts struck him, burning through his exoskeleton, but he kept moving. He reached the terminal and began working the controls with his remaining functional arms. Shields down in 10 seconds, he called out, his voice weak from his injuries. The room shook as the station took a direct hit from something outside. Defiant. This is Webb, Ryan reported. We've got the shields coming down, but we're taking heavy fire. Susan's voice came through his comm system. Hold on, Commander. The fleet is moving into position. Outside, the battle had reached its peak intensity. Hundreds of ships filled the space around Zorkia Prime, exchanging fire in the largest space battle in galactic history. With the planetary shields down, Susan ordered the fleet to begin precision strikes on military targets on the surface. The Defiant led the attack, its upgraded weapon systems tearing through the remaining hegemony defenses. On the planet below, the Zorkian High Council watched in disbelief as their supposedly impregnable world came under direct attack. Impossible, whispered Elder Zorith, watching through the chamber windows as explosions lit up the sky. No one has ever breached our defenses. General Drax, who had survived a year of defeats against the human-led alliance, turned to the council with grim determination. "Elders, we must activate the final defense." Zorith's three eyes widened. "The singularity generator? But that would destroy the entire system." "Better destruction than defeat," Drax replied. After a moment of silence, Zorith gave a slight nod. Drax entered a code into his wrist device, initiating a sequence that had never been used before. Deep beneath the surface of Zorkia Prime, an ancient weapon began to power up. The quantum singularity generator was designed as a last resort, capable of creating a controlled black hole that would consume everything in the system. Aboard the Defiant, Alan Porter noticed strange readings on his instruments. "Admiral," he called out, "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup on the planet. Exotic particles like nothing I've seen before." Susan frowned. "Analysis?" "It appears to be some kind of singularity technology," Alan replied, his voice tense. "If I'm reading this correctly, they're preparing to collapse the entire system." Susan's mind raced through options. "Can we stop it?" Alan studied the readings. "Maybe. If we combine all our firepower and direct it at the source of the energy, we might be able to create a containment field." "Do it," Susan ordered without hesitation. "All ships, this is Admiral Miller. Converge fire on these coordinates immediately." The human and alien ships turned their weapons toward the location Alan had identified. Mass drivers, gravity lances, Tresky temporal disruptors, and Draconite crystal beams all fired simultaneously at the same point. The energies combined, creating a swirling vortex of power that surrounded the building quantum singularity. For a terrible moment, it seemed like it wouldn't be enough. Then, with a flash that temporarily blinded sensors across the system, the singularity collapsed in on itself. The resulting explosion devastated much of Zorkia Prime's surface, but the planet itself remained intact and the fleet had been saved from destruction. "Status report," Susan demanded once communications were restored. "Heavy damage to the planet's surface," Greg reported. "Their capital city is gone. The singularity weapon has been destroyed." "And the High Council?" There was a pause as Greg checked the incoming reports. "They've surrendered, Admiral. The hegemony has fallen." A cheer erupted on the bridge, quickly spreading throughout the ship and then to the entire fleet. After 50,000 years of tyranny, the hegemony had been defeated. Susan didn't join in the celebration immediately. She looked at the view screen showing the damaged planet below. "Begin rescue operations," she ordered. "We came to end their rule, not their civilization." As human and alien ships moved to help survivors on the surface, Seuss. 1 year after the Battle of Zorkia Prime, representatives from over 300 species gathered on Earth. The Great Hall of the United Nations had been expanded for this historic occasion, with special accommodations for beings of all shapes, sizes, and environmental needs. Admiral Susan Miller stood near the stage in her formal uniform, watching as delegates filed in. Beside her, President Nancy Clark reviewed her notes for the speech that would officially establish the Galactic Confederation. "Nervous?" Susan asked quietly. The president smiled. "A little. It's not every day you help found an interstellar democracy." After the fall of the hegemony, the liberated worlds had faced a critical question. What would replace the empire that had ruled for 50,000 years? The answer, proposed by Earth and eagerly accepted by former subjugated species, was the Galactic Confederation, an alliance of equals where each world would govern itself while cooperating on matters that affected all. Susan spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Commander Ryan Webb, now General Webb, sat with representatives of the Special Forces units he had trained, a mix of humans and aliens learning to work together. Dr. Alan Porter moved through the room, deep in conversation with scientists from a dozen worlds, and Tikaril, recovered from his injuries at the Battle of Zorkia Prime, led the Valkyrie delegation. At the appointed time, President Clark approached the podium. The room fell silent. "Today," she began, "we turn the page on a dark chapter of galactic history and begin a new story, one that we will write together as equals." She spoke of cooperation instead of domination, of diversity as a strength rather than a weakness to be controlled. When she finished, representatives from each major species came forward to sign the Galactic Charter. Near the back of the room sat a lone Zorkian. Ambassador Xalmor represented what remained of the once mighty hegemony. The Zorkians, stripped of their empire but allowed to retain their homeworld, had been permitted to join the Confederation as equals, no more special rights or powers than any other world. After the ceremony, Xalmor approached Susan as she stood alone by a window, looking at the stars visible in the night sky. "Admiral Miller," the Zorkian said formally, "I wish to convey my people's appreciation for your restraint after victory." Susan turned to face him. "We came to end tyranny, not to become tyrants ourselves." The Zorkian's three eyes blinked in sequence. "Still, it is remarkable. We ruled the stars for 50,000 years without challenge. Then humans arrived, and in just 3 years, everything changed." "Change was long overdue," Susan replied. "Perhaps," Xalmor conceded. "But know this, many among my people still believe we will rise again." Susan smiled slightly. "They're welcome to try, but next time we won't be alone." Across the room, General Ryan Webb was overseeing the new Joint Military Training Program. Human officers taught combat tactics to species that had forgotten how to fight, while aliens shared technologies humans had never imagined. "The key," Ryan explained to a group of cadets, "is to combine our strengths. No single approach is perfect, but together, we're unstoppable." Meanwhile, Alan Porter led the newly established Confederation Science Academy. Researchers from 100 worlds collaborated on projects that would have been impossible under the restrictive hegemony. "Imagine," Alan told his colleagues, "what we can accomplish when we share knowledge freely instead of hoarding it." As the reception continued, Susan stepped outside for a moment of quiet. From the balcony, she watched as a ship descended toward the spaceport in the distance. It bore the markings of a hegemony refugee vessel, one of many that had come seeking asylum. Despite everything, Earth had opened its doors to those displaced by the war. The ship's hull bore graffiti and multiple alien scripts. Susan didn't need a translator to understand the message that had become common knowledge throughout the galaxy. "Beware the humans, unless you need friends." Susan smiled as she looked up at the stars. Humanity had not only survived its first contact with alien life, but had fundamentally changed the course of galactic history. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had transformed into something greater, a chance to build a more just and equal galaxy for all. The stars no longer held just mystery and danger. They held promise. The end.